It's unbelievable. All right, our next game here, speaking of those Cowboys, the Cowboys with a tough loss to Miami, really a goal line fumble by Hunter Lepke, the difference in this one. But we'll start with the Miami offense. Raheem Mostert, pretty pedestrian day for Raheem Mostert, Jay, but he catches the touchdown, which saves it, while De'Von Achane, not much going for him at all in a game that Tyreek Hill, even on a bum ankle, was the Dolphins' offense, as he often is.
Yep. Here's the crazy thing about Tyreek is that he didn't have any bomb plays. He still caught 9 passes for 99 yards. He was decisive. He won them the game effectively on the final drive. And also, he really should have had like a 95-yard touchdown on the first drive that was just, I don't know if it was thrown the wrong shoulder or he misread it, but that's just how incredible Tyreek Hill is, just his gravity and the fact that he's able to put up that stat line without relying on a bomb. Elsewhere on the Miami offense, I mean, Raheem Mostert, who got banged up in this game, came back in, catches the touchdown, still tied for the NFL lead in touchdowns with Christian McCaffrey at 21. De'Von Achane just hasn't delivered since coming back from his injury. Raheem is still clearly the guy in that backfield.
Matthew, what'd you think of the day for the Miami running backs, especially Achane, who, has been a fantasy star at times this season, but now has been held in check for the most part since returning from injuries?
Yeah, to me, that's the bigger concern. Look, the Cowboys defense played really well. We talked about this earlier in the week that we thought that, when we did our futures segment, last week, I took the under in this game. That was my bet, was the under, which at the time was 51.5 for Dolphins Cowboys. And I'm like, I think these are two good defenses. I think it's going to play much, tighter than the spread and the line is indicating here. I think it's going to be a lower scoring game that ended up cashing as well. And to that point, they bottle up this run defense as well. Mostert gets you the touchdown as well, but honestly, under 50, basically 50 total yards for Mostert. He's now had under 50 rushing yards in 3 of the past 4, just played 30% of the snaps against the Cowboys. Obviously, that leg injury you mentioned, Connor. But Achane's the bigger concern, right? He's now been under 35 rushing yards in 2 straight games. He had just 27% of the team rushes against Dallas. He's been under 35% now in 3 straight. Fewest receptions in a game since week 11, single-digit fantasy points in back-to-back games. I think you're still starting Mostert next week at Baltimore, but I don't feel great about Achane, especially given how good the Ravens are playing defensively. Honestly, I thought they did a really good job. I know this sounds crazy to say, but I thought the Ravens did a really good job of bottling up Christian McCaffrey once you consider, when you're grading on a scale. I mean, because McCaffrey is McCaffrey, and he mostly had that one big run, but he didn't really kill you. He still had a good fantasy day, and he got the touchdown and a couple of dump off passes. But the truth of the matter is that I thought when you consider how amazing McCaffrey is, I thought the Ravens did a pretty good job of bottling him up. And so, given the lack of production from Achane recently, the lack of usage, he's somebody that's I don't think he's a must start next week in the fantasy playoffs.
On the Dallas side of things, an average day for Dak Prescott, but a typical day for CeeDee Lamb, Jay. I mean, 6 catches, 118 yards, and the touchdown. He also gets involved with the run game, adds 14 yards there. This is CeeDee Lamb's offense.
Yeah, it is. I mean, magnificent touchdown in the first half. He's kind of anonymous in the second and third quarters, but then came back into it at the end. Really tough day for Tony Pollard, who I think is probably the fantasy LVP this year relative to his ADP. He goes 12 for 38, just the one catch for 5 yards. With Dak, I thought Dak was really good in this game. Even though the stats weren't great, he leads them down the field at the end. Kind of shows you how silly MVP is. Whereas if Micah Parsons gets a strip sack on that last Dolphins drive, then Dak is your second favorite for MVP right now. If Sean McDermott doesn't have 12 men on the field against the Broncos and Jake Elliott doesn't make the 59-yarder, Josh Allen's your runaway MVP favorite. But I thought Dak was really solid. It was impressive that he was able to have a solid game outdoors against a really tough defense. I think he's just going to pulverize the Detroit Lions back home on Saturday night. So you're starting all your Cowboys as usual in that game.
Okay, let's move over to Giants-Eagles here.
Can I just take 1 minute here?
Sure, please.
Can I just take 1 minute here, Connor? Just to complain about Tony Pollard. He was suggested to me as a fantasy ride or die. I rejected it. Candidly, I rejected it because I thought it was too obvious. But I think it is a very strong argument that the biggest bust in fantasy football this year, non-health related, has been Tony Pollard, because certainly people were drafted high and haven't performed, but they got injured, what have you. But for somebody that stayed healthy all year long, Tony Pollard, who was drafted as basically 15th overall kind of in the middle of the second round. He was a top 10 running back drafted. He was often went 5 or 6. I saw among running backs. He's running back 22 on the season, outside the top 20. For the season, he has 64 touches in the red zone. That's second most in the NFL, right? 64 red zone touches, second most in the NFL. He's converted 6% of them into touchdowns. Rico Dowdle has the same amount of touchdowns in the red zone on 47 fewer touches. Think about that. Tony Pollard has 47 more touches in the red zone than Rico Dowdle. They have the same amount of red zone touches. Here's some of the people that have more red zone touchdowns than Tony Pollard this year. Najee Harris, Chuba Hubbard, Jerick McKinnon, Deontay Foreman, who was inactive for the first month and a half of the season and who missed yesterday due to a personal matter. I mean, Pollard has been so absolutely brutal. He is he's averaging just 13.3 fantasy points per game. By the way, those running backs that I just mentioned, Hubbard, McKinnon, Foreman, Harris, Najee Harris, they all have fewer than 35 red zone touches. So here's a guy, 64 red zone touches, converted just 6% of them. And you saw it against the Dolphins as well. He gets a sweep. He's got the edge. All he has to do is pick the right angle. Like, he could have beaten the guy to the corner, to the pylon. Instead, he cuts it inside, gets tackled at the 1-inch line, doesn't get a touchdown. Now you're saying, Barry, why are you bitter? Why are you so angry? Did you have him on a fantasy team? Did you have him in a playoff that you needed him to come through for you? And the answer is yes. You're damn right I did. Yeah, it's awful. Brutal. It's very upsetting. It's one thing if you have offensive line issues, if you get hurt, but like, he's gotten opportunities. He's gotten massive amounts of opportunities, and he just hasn't converted. He's been bad this year, guys. He's been bad on an offense of the Cowboys that overall has been good. Anyway, I'm very bitter about Tony Pollard. He single-handedly killed one team that should have won a championship. I was in an expert league, and I was in the semifinals, and I would have won. But instead, I had James Cook and Tony Pollard, and they combined for 10 points. It's a very deep league where you start like 6 wide receivers. It's a crazy league. And the guy that was playing, Jared Smola, shout out to my buddy Jared Smola over at Draft Sharks, does a great job. Jared Smola started Justin Watson. Justin Watson had more fantasy points than Tony Pollard and James Cook combined. That was the kind of day it was for me.
Okay, it's all noted, Matthew.
If Tony Pollard scores that touchdown, I move on. Oh, by the way, and if Darren Waller, like if stupid Tyrod Taylor hits Darren Waller,
perfect segue.
Yeah, exactly. I would have won as well because it's a tight end premium league, and I had to start Darren Waller. It's a super deep, crazy deep league. Anyway, congratulations to Jared Smola for being smart enough not to draft Tony Pollard, who was awful this year.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and Rotoworld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto-World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.